morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thank you to Creative Mornings and everybody at Dick's. I appreciate you all for coming out this morning. Thank you. Let's see. This morning, I'm going to talk about the sense of touch and how it can enhance your creativity. For the sake of argument, when I refer to touch, we're not just talking the physical, tangible action. Touch, at least for this talk, will be synonymous with reaching out or connecting with someone. It will, in this talk, appear periodically. All right, now, we got out of the way. I just wanted to touch on that. It's a horrible joke. I'm sorry. I'm a dad. This is how it works. I know you're wondering, who is this dude telling these horrible jokes? That dude. I am Dameon Williams. I'm an illustrator and designer. I've been designing and drawing professionally for 25 years and working in healthcare for close to 20 years with a severe overlap of both fields. That's how it works. What does that mean? Basically, it means that I'm not only capable of caring for you all, but I can draw myself caring for you all. It's a cool thing. While we're on the subject about caring for people, I do want to ask you this, and I'm going to warn you, it's kind of a downer topic, but I promise it will get better. How many of you remember the beginning of the pandemic? Oh yeah, I'm sure you do. It was not long ago. It's hard to keep track of time. It's weird. In early 2020, we had a mysterious virus that was invisible, deadly, and random. And at that point especially, it seemed like it didn't discriminate. Thing is, if you thought it was scary, wherever you happened to be at that time, I can say now, especially now, that it was even more so in hospitals. Because I tell you this, because I was there. I was working at Wake Med, wearing a little eyewear and a mask, and sometimes we would have a little gown, but that right there, it's pretty much, even now, we have to wear, or folks still have to wear a mask in the hospital. That's just how it works. But yeah, that's what most people were looking like in the hospital. Let me take you back. In the hospital, we didn't know what it was or how to stop it. And though we encouraged people to stay home while we went to work, we were all away from family and friends. Doctors, nurses, therapists, we couldn't touch their patients without protective gear. We didn't have a vaccine. We didn't have many answers. We just knew people were getting gravely sick. And at that point, mentally for many of us, the worst place was in a hospital, even though the hospital was great. The unknown is frightening for everybody. That's where I was. I was working in a hospital where I had to watch both my coworkers and the patients be separated from each other. Families of patients were not allowed to see their loved ones, and using tablets was really the only way to communicate. Often the only way for patients to get in touch with family was to connect through a tablet so they could do a video chat. And that's pretty much it. That's how it worked. It was a pretty dark time for a lot of us. For me, I did have my passion for art to help keep my mind clear. Make sure the mic is. I had that long before healthcare, and I needed it probably more than ever. In addition to the art, I also had my faith. And it was through my faith that I learned to keep it simple and follow this basic rule to control the stresses of the world around me. Simply just stop, look, and listen. Through this, I found myself being able to not only live, but to also create in this seemingly different environment. Once I really put the phrase into practice, I started to realize that opportunities to use my creative gifts didn't just disappear during the pandemic. They were everywhere. I just simply needed to stop, look, and listen. This is a tattoo or at least a drawing for a future tattoo of, there was a nurse on a COVID floor who right before the pandemic really got going, she lost her husband. And she's a mom of 3 girls and it was working crazy hours, especially at that point in time. On the COVID floor, you were more or less, it seemed like you were stuck there and all you were seeing was what you would imagine, which was kind of dire. She spoke to me and she knew I was an artist and asked if I could help her come up with a tattoo that would, symbolize her husband, his favorite flower, and the time, I believe, of his passing. So, use my gift to kind of help her through that, and that's kind of how it works. For that, I listened to her story. So listening, super important. During the pandemic, I noticed that you see all sorts of different face masks. I felt like there wasn't a lot of face masks for little black girls. So I created one. I used my child that's not my child, but the drawing is my kid, to do the whole black girl magic thing, play off the Disney sorcerer, and put that on a mask, and ended up selling that to a few folks and giving the mask out to some folks. And I can officially say that I helped add, a little bit of magic for hopefully some females out there, little black girls. I have one myself, so she's a little too young for a face mask, but hopefully she won't really need to use it anytime soon. And here we have a bunch of oxygen tanks, as you can see. We learned fairly early in the pandemic that it was oxygen that was truly helping folks stay alive, to be quite honest. But prior to that, we were used to more of these tanks. They don't have a lot of time on them, and you have to constantly change these out in people's homes. So what we ended up doing was giving out this little OxyLife. It's like a little suitcase. Takes the air around you and converts it to oxygen. So it's a concentrator. It allows you to, it doesn't run out. That's the thing. You plug it up, keep on breathing. We didn't have a lot prior to the pandemic, but we had to invest in an awful lot because you would have a lot of their technicians that would have to go to people's homes. And instead of collecting oxygen tanks, they would have to, what we didn't want them to do was go in folks' homes, especially at that point in time. So we would give them this and they would hold on to these little things here. The problem is the folks that distributed these OxyLife machines, their directions were horrible. A lot of patients couldn't understand it. They're trying to, and they're already in a state. So what I decided to do was create a placard that would allow them in a few steps to turn the machine on and get it going. It's something I felt like it was fairly simple and it should have been created, but I didn't see it there, so I created it. And I made sure I had, because the population was hugely, you had a lot of Spanish-speaking people and English-speaking. I made the placard so you had both sides, English on one, Spanish on the other. This helped a lot of the patients and it helped a lot of the nurses because the nurses didn't necessarily know how to use this machine and they would only allow a certain amount of people in these rooms. So this helped everybody and it was just all about sure design, but compassion. If I'm gonna be in a situation like that, I want things to be as I guess as easy as possible to manipulate because your mind's other places, I'm sure. In this case, it was a stop, look, listen, and ultimately touch. With all this, and using my gifts in the hospital, I found a way to thrive. But the thing is, that could only last for so long. After so many years in the hospital, and especially after 2 years of COVID, I had to step away. The fact is, COVID affected us all, but not all equally. People who worked in hospitals or in retail like Walmart were considered essential workers. What comes with that title comes at a cost. Burnout, at least for me, took shape. After I spent close to 2 decades in healthcare, I knew it was time to move on. So I chose to devote my time to creating full time. Today, I'm a designer and a freelance illustrator working out of a busy print shop in Durham. I work hands-on with clients and different business representatives, more of the touch, and I love what I do. Every day is a passion to care, like in a hospital, but in my own field. I devote that same passion for a lot of my freelance projects, like this one. It was about, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, I was approached by the Carolina Hurricanes to do a poster for Black History Month. They didn't give me a lot of time to do it, but I mean, it happens, because who knew Black History Month was in February? It's a thing. But still, put this thing together, and it was fun to do, awesome to do, and I appreciate them for the opportunity. I think tonight they're gonna unveil this thing at the game. So yeah, it's awesome opportunity. I appreciate them, and of course, go Canes. Let's see. That passion shows up in these illustrations created for these alumni magazines at NC State and Lenore Ryan University, respectively. It was a little pre and during pandemic, or I forget, how time is. The past couple of years where I was approached about doing some stuff for the magazine. So, Spy Illustrations is a thing I enjoy, and I appreciate them for the opportunity, and yeah, just allows me to keep on drawing, more touch. This here, the passion came about in this pet portrait for a client that wanted her pooch, this is during the pandemic, on a drink menu for her wedding, outdoor wedding. That's how they roll. She wanted a pooch. You would think the pooch passed on. The pooch is alive. Pooch is fine. She's not drinking though. She drinks water, that's it. As much as I love my full-time job and my freelance work, it's my personal projects that really gets me going. One of which I'm at the tail end of as we speak. Right now I'm currently doing these ABCs of February. You can always go to my Instagram and see for yourself. This would be my own ABCs of February. It's one of my biggest and longest running projects to date. I've done it for the past 6 years, and honestly, especially while I was working at Wake Med, it got me through the pandemic. If you aren't familiar with me, you may not know the ABCs or my ABCs of February. This is what it is. Every February, I cover a topic pertaining to Black history and illustrate it from the letter A to Z, one letter a day. I would post these daily on the various platforms. Instagram is my main one, but sometimes you'll see it on Twitter or Facebook. And include a blurb of a history lesson attached to each letter. I've done this since 2018, mostly solo, although last year I was joined by my good friend Josh Lewis. My first 2 years, I opted to use a number of artistic styles, kind of like what you see there, to illustrate the historical stories. Once year 3 came, I decided to be a little bit more intentional about the style and the format used. Whether it was using a limited color palette or the use of certain patterns or halftones, I wanted the look to match a bit better with the subject, though there were no certain rules. Here are a few of my favorites. Well, those are my favorites too. That's kind of what it looks like on the Instagram feed. For year 2, I covered Dorothy Johnson Vaughn in the letter V. She was a mathematician and human computer who worked for NASA. I enjoyed this because I could manipulate the photo, and I'm a fan of texture work, so you're probably going to see it in all of my pieces. So stuff like this, I enjoy, I really do. Year 4, William Lee in the letter L. General Washington's wartime companion. I love the one color, the halftone, and 2 other simple brushes used for this. In all the pieces, honestly, for this particular year. I think this was the year where I covered Black heroes of the Revolutionary War. I didn't hear about a lot of folks, but I learned that year there's way more than we figured. And this is from year 1, Dr. Rick Kittles in the letter K. He's a biologist specializing in human genetics. And this one was especially cool because I think this is when I posted on Twitter as well. And I tag a lot of these folks if they're still around. And he ended up reaching out to me and thanking me. I was like, hey, I appreciate that. And he's telling me I appreciate you. Well, okay, thank you, Dr. Kittles. Awesome. So I've been asked a lot, why do I do this? What's my personal motivation? And truthfully, it's because I really dig history. Forgotten history even more so. And the United States happens to be filled with both, so, it's easy. The fact is, people who look like each and every one of you in here have contributed great things to our society, and that's a fact. And a lot of them were never talked about or even known. When we tell those stories, you show that representation does matter. And when that matters, especially to a kid, when they see this, they realize the sky is the limit. History is there for us when we're ready. We truly just need to learn to embrace it and not try to ban it, because it's going to come out. The truth usually does. And just touch it. I'm going to rewind a little bit and talk about a little bit of my beginnings. I started in I guess it was corporate design, and this is me out of school. It was a big facility, a big national phone book directory. And you're starting to see my age. The last little bit of time when phone books actually meant something to folks, I was helping create a lot of the ads you would see in these books. And it was a great job, but it was more of a cubicle, not super creative type situation. And, I got paid, and I was in the field of my degree, but I just realized I just didn't have passion for it. There's no creative drive to make things better. I eventually left that world to go to a smaller, more creative space, but that ended up being a smaller version of what I left. And at that point, I wasn't brave enough to leave it, so they ended up firing me. I simply wasn't meeting the numbers, because it was always about the numbers. Feeling like the creative world wasn't for me anymore, I went into retail and did something that I never had the chance to do at my previous jobs. I was able to interact and connect with people, touch, and I found real joy in that. Eventually, a healthcare rep I met during this time saw that joy and suggested that I consider connecting with them for a new role at Wake Med. Had no history in healthcare. I'm like, sure, why not? Someone reached out to me so I could learn to reach out to others, which allowed me to reach inside myself, find my passion, craft that passion, and share it with others, thereby touching their lives. That, honestly, is my story. And I'm here because I want to encourage everybody to tell their stories, because you all have them. Using the tools you have, whether it's at art, writing, music, organizing in your community, whatever, use what you got to get what you want. This tablet I'm reading from right now is my touch, is my tool. Practically everything you've seen here, except for the first year of the ABCs of February, which was done in Photoshop, go Adobe. Everything else was done on my tablet. And yes, it was done in Procreate. You know, they're good too. Whatever tool you have, just find it and use it. To thrive as an artist, you need to feed off of people. You need to learn from them. You need to connect with them. I share a lot of my art through Instagram, and I'm happy to share a little bit more about myself with you today. If you ask, we'll have some question and answer, so it's all good. COVID pulled us all apart. In other ways, though, it brought us all together. We're not the same people we were when this whole thing started. We can use these experiences as lessons to see the systems in our society and change them, to be better people to each other, to learn and to create. So I want you to use your art, your glorious gifts, to bring people together and absolutely share your story. I am not this symmetrical, but you know, he's cool looking. I appreciate you all, and what I like to do, generally, I have a little sticker for a few folks here, a sticker and magnet. And this is a mantra I came up with, well, I believe I read someplace and decided to make it a visual. This a few years ago. It is, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you be at ease, and may you be loved. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you. Thank you.
So I pushed us towards the 10 o'clock time, and I'm sorry about that. So, but we'll carve out some time for Q&A. Feel free to leave if you've got to bounce. But should I give these to people that ask questions?
Go for it. Yeah.
So he has these wonderful little stickers and magnets of this graphic, so you will get one if you ask a question. Yeah.
You talk a lot about being really intentional with your touch points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even where you talked about the graphics for the oxygen machines and making sure that that was in languages that was inclusive to the population that was being served.
Right.
But what's the practice that you have personally that helps that intentionality flow through those touch points and how you connect with people?
Honestly, it is the research. For ABCs, for anything I do when it comes to design, there's the research phase. Some people kind of dismiss it and they do a quick whatever as far as on Pinterest or Google and whatnot. Nothing wrong with that, but it's in the research where you really find, and that's kind of the UX person in me, digging that stuff up. It just helps inform me, and it makes the whole process a lot easier. So once I did the research, and it's easy when you're in the hospital and you're running across folks, I can ask the nurses and the patients. So it's a little easier for me. And through that, you know, you put something together and you hope that it works. And it seemed like it did. Yes.
So, touching up on research, because if you guys don't know Dameon, but you know a little bit about him, he's one of the most thoughtful and intentional designers I've ever met. So I was wondering, where do you start your research? Where does your inspiration come from, and how do you kind of dig into it and do that writing component as well as the illustration?
Thank you, Jacob, for that. I'll pay you afterwards. It starts, it's rather simple. For me, I go online because it's easy access. Now, I am not afraid of a library to kind of really go in the weeds, but these days, online seems to really be where it starts for me. And then from there, it's kind of a rabbit hole and YouTube videos. And, if I can speak to folks directly, like with the hospital, I'm gonna ask them. Online is great, but ain't nothing like, a person in front of you, because they'll tell you, like at the hospital, the folks in the basement of the hospital that work all the different jobs that sometimes get dismissed, or they're just missed altogether, but they're just as important. Those are the folks that are almost invisible when it comes to a hospital. So they hear everything and see everything. So you got to know where to go when it comes to getting your info. People are not invisible. If you think they are, those are the people you want to speak to, because they know more than you think. Yes.
Okay, my question was this. During the time that you were working in the hospital at the COVID height, were you able to have any community with other healthcare workers who also had art as their either self-care, trauma response kind of process for things? Did you have any community come out of that with people that you were working with who also have maybe taken it into their next level of dedication or exploration?
Not necessarily with folks there. There were a couple of groups I was a part of at a hospital, and they would meet with folks in the community and we would do different art projects, former patients, just to kind of, it was more of a thing artistically for them. A lot of these things kind of broke apart because of social distancing, or people just couldn't get to the hospital. So that really caused havoc. It was more or less trying to keep up with my AIGA chapter, or folks that I knew that were a part of that. That's honestly what kept me going. But as far as in the hospital, a lot of that was fractured, I'm sad to say. Yeah.
So just like prior to COVID and before you started creating to share with the world, which one came first? Was it the creativity or the history? Like, have you always just been an artist and then you had a passion for history and found a way to combine it, or vice versa?
It was the art first, then the history. I had no idea that history was really that much of a thing for me. I was into it, but not like that. And it started with me seeing articles or whatever I would see or hear on the radio, and things I didn't think got enough attention, whether it was social awareness, whatever the case. I would try to do a picture, or create an image to go with that story, maybe a blurb, because I know maybe those stories would be missed, but if people see it on my Instagram page and they do follow, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. I see the image, and they read a little bit about it and realize, okay, in this community, COVID seems to spread more, or whatever the situation. But yeah, it was the art and then the history. And sometimes you have the art, but you don't know what you want to do with it. That's how it works. And then you run into something that you feel like, okay, this connects. And for me, it ended up being the history. Yeah.
So AI for the designer, friend or foe? Sorry.
We could use tools to be to help us and be friendly, but it's always about the limits, and humans have a history of pushing limits, which is great, but then sometimes we go way overboard. We've seen movies about this and plenty of books, but I am curious to see exactly where it takes us. So it's always within reason. I mean, we can't toss all that stuff out because that's how technology works, but You know, we don't need a Terminator situation. I mean, we just dealt with a pandemic, man. Come on. I'm just saying. Be friendly to it.
One last question.
Yes.
I'm curious about your creative practice as a parent and how that comes into your role as a parent, how you bring your children into your creative practice and help them grow their own.
That's a good question. I have an older son who is on the spectrum, and for him, super high functioning, but it's about storytelling. And for him, sometimes school and different things when it comes to his scholastic career it's not coming as easy to him. But he is all about creating animations, and he has a little story in a book he wrote. And so I want to encourage him using many Adobe products, including After Effects, to create and you know, move a lot of things when it comes to animation, tie that into whatever he's trying to learn as far as in school, and make it more of you know, entertainment. He's capable of these things, but sometimes his attention when it comes to that is practically non-existent. So you have to make it fun. You make it fun for him and for the other kids too. They realize, okay, you know, not so bad, and tie it, you know, in a very clever way to his scholastics. He gets the picture. So you just have to tie it all together. Make it interesting. I mean, some of that stuff was boring to me. So I get it. So I would do what I would love if I were a kid.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dameon. Thank you all for coming.
No problem.